Around the world, there are some highways that were built in places that seem impossible, like the roads twist through the mountains, they cross frozen lakes, and they cut into cliffs. So today's video, we're going to take a look at 15 of the strangest highways and roads. Number 15. The landslide zone on the Karakoram Highway in Pakistan and China. The Karakoram Highway, it's often called the KKH, it's one of the highest paved international roads in the world, and it connects Pakistan's Gilgit-Baltistan region with China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. While the road itself is pretty well known, it is one of the most strange and challenging stretches in the area. It's because the terrain is so dynamic that the alignment of the road exists largely due to a disaster. In January of 2010, a massive landslide blocked the river and created Atabad Lake. This event was widely documented by local authorities, the Pakistani government, and international aid organizations, and it buried several villages, destroyed about 24 kilometers of the original highway, and formed a lake that stretched 20 kilometers at its peak. The strangeness of this highway section comes from how the engineers had to rebuild it. Instead of rerouting the road way above the lake, China and Pakistan collaborated to construct a system of tunnels and bridges directly along the lake's edge. It was completed in 2015, and this new realignment includes 5 tunnels with a combined length of about 7 kilometers and several bridges. While the area still around it is geologically active, seasonal rockfall and slope movement continue to happen, and traffic closures are not uncommon. The Pakistani government consistently issues road advisories during heavy rains or spring thaw periods, and they're not exaggerated. Landslide-related disruptions here are a recurring part of life in this corridor. Few other roads in the world have ever had their routing permanently changed in this way within the past 20 years. It's a critical transportation link between Pakistan and China. It carries commercial trade and local traffic year-round, and predicting the exact timing of these kinds of landslide events is not possible with current tools, so engineers simply monitor the slopes and respond as needed. Number 14. The Dalton Highway up in Alaska. The Dalton Highway. It's in northern Alaska. It is one of the most remote roads in the U.S. Built in the 1970s, it supports construction and maintenance of the Trans-Alaska pipeline system. It goes for about 666 kilometers, or about 414 miles, from near Livingood to Dead Horse. It's close to the Arctic Ocean, too. The highway's not unusual because of any extreme engineering, but because of how isolated and challenging it is for everyday travel. Most of the road is gravel rather than pavement, and large stretches have no services whatsoever. Information from the Alaska Department of Transportation shows that between Cold Foot and Dead Horse, about 240 miles, there's no public fuel stations, restaurants, or even lodging outside of work camps. And of course, the environment adds another layer of difficulty. Winter temperatures commonly drop below -30°C, that's -22 Fahrenheit, and wind chills can be much lower. And in the summer, the road becomes muddy and rutted due to thawing permafrost. And these conditions are well documented by the Alaska DOT, so truck trafficking support oil operations remain heavy year-round, meaning passenger vehicles have to share narrow, rough sections with these large tractor-trailers. One neat thing about it is that it crosses the Arctic Circle. It makes it one of the few roads where drivers can continuously travel from boreal forest into true Arctic tundra. This whole stretch is classified as a haul road, meaning its primary purpose is industrial, not tourism. So public travel is allowed, but visitors are repeatedly warned by official sources that the road conditions can deteriorate rapidly. Unlike most major highways, it doesn't pass through any towns, and it wasn't designed with the public in mind. Emergency services here are minimal, and the environment will quickly become hazardous. But despite the difficulty, the highway remains an essential route for oil field logistics, and it's one of the world's clearest examples of a functional industrial road that's become a destination for travelers seeking a pretty different experience. Number 13. The Stelvio Pass in Italy. Passo dello Stelvio. It's located in the eastern Alps of northern Italy. It's one of the highest paved mountain passes in Europe, at over 2,700 meters above sea level. While, of course, the entire road is famous, what makes it unusual is the switchbacks. The northern approach has 48 numbered hairpin turns stacked extremely close together along a steep valley wall. This kind of geometry results from the pass being constructed between 1820 and 1825 under the Austrian Empire, using surveying and engineering techniques available at that time. It was built for military movement rather than any tourism, and its layout reflects the need to connect the area's valley with the Tyrol region while keeping gradients manageable for 19th century transport. This created a distinctive zigzag pattern that's unchanged today. Travel, though, is highly regulated due to snowfall and, of course, avalanche risk. The Italian government typically closes the entire pass from late October to late May, though the exact dates vary based on annual weather conditions. Cycling events have also taken place here. The Giro d'Italia, Italy's major professional cycling race, occasionally includes the Stelvio Pass. But when it does, race organizers have to monitor conditions carefully because the altitude affects both the athletes and the support vehicles. But despite the dramatic appearance of all these switchbacks, the road is pretty cool and a functioning mountain pass, so you have to navigate narrow lanes, limited guardrails on some segments, and tight turns that require slow movement. The visibility of opposing traffic can be limited too during peak tourist seasons. It's strange not because of danger manufactured for dramatic effect, but because it's an old military road that still functions in a contemporary transportation world, largely unchanged from its original design. Number 12. The Taroko Gorge Road in Taiwan. Taiwan's Provincial Highway Number 8, particularly the section passing through the Taroko Gorge, is one of the most distinctive roads in Asia. This roadway cuts through marble canyons, tunnels, overhangs, and narrow cliffside passages within a national park. These segments are directly carved into rock faces, and it leaves extremely limited shoulder space. The route was originally developed during the Japanese colonial period that was about 1890 to 1945, but most of what exists today was constructed in the late 1950s and early 60s as part of the Central Cross-Island Highway project. The gorge itself is primarily marble and schist, which are strong materials, but they're prone to fracturing, so as a result, rockfalls here are pretty common, especially after quakes or typhoons, both of which Taiwan experiences frequently. The events are thoroughly documented by Taiwan's Central Weather Administration and the National Center for Research on Earthquake Engineering. The government regularly closes portions of the highways for stabilization work or after seismic events. When sections become too unstable, they have to permanently reroute some sections. A half-tunnel structure is built directly against a cliff face with one side open to the gorge. This design protects the vehicles from falling rock while preserving space in areas where the full tunnel construction isn't feasible. And the road carries both local traffic and visitors heading to Taroko National Park's trailheads and viewpoints, but the government frequently issues warnings about the unpredictable conditions here. Maintenance crews have to routinely clear and repair areas, but the frequency of the work makes this highway one of the more demanding routes in their network. But despite the issues, Highway 8 is open and functional because it's a critical cross-island connection. The result is a road that stands out. It's in one of the island's most dramatic landscapes. Number 11. The Sani Pass, South Africa. The Sani Pass is a mountain road connecting KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa with the Mothotlong district in Lesotho. It rises from roughly 1,500 meters to over 2,800 meters within just 9 kilometers of travel. This extreme elevation gain, combined with a rugged gravel surface and a repeated freeze-thaw cycle, is what makes this pass one of the strangest roads in southern Africa. The Sani Pass was developed in the early 20th century to support trade between highland herders in Lesotho and merchants in South Africa. Before vehicles here, traders used to use pack animals to transport the wool, mohair, and other goods along the same route. The modern roadway, though, remains unpaved, and although there's been discussions about future upgrades, the official government statements have made it clear that no full paving has happened. Certain sections do exceed a 20% incline, making them pretty inaccessible to standard passenger cars. Both South Africa's Department of Transport and Lesotho's border authorities require that vehicles ascending the pass from the South African side be four-wheel drive. And weather variability too is another thoroughly documented aspect. The pass is subject to sudden storms and fog due to its altitude, and snowfall is common in the winter months. When conditions deteriorate, the authorities will sometimes close the route temporarily, and the closures are logged in official communications so road maintenance crews address the erosion, drainage failures, and rutted surfaces. At the summit, though, sits the South African border post on one side and Lesotho border post on the other. This border crossing is functional year-round, but it relies heavily on weather reports to determine any operating conditions. But any uncertainty about closure times is clearly outlined by the governments that are involved. Yeah, it's pretty weird. Very few other border posts in the world require off-road vehicles for access. The road itself isn't artificially dramatized. Its challenges are described in official transport advisories. This pass is essential for connecting communities in Lesotho's highlands with markets and services in South Africa. Number 10. The Col de Turini in France. The Col de Turini is a mountain pass in the Alpes-Maritimes region of southeastern France. Unlike many high passes driven for tourism, this one's got a long history of being used for transportation between valleys and small villages. The road has an extremely tight sequence of hairpin turns, narrow corridors through dense forest, and its long-time use in the Monte Carlo Rally. The pass sits at about 1,600 meters above sea level, and the road leading to the summit winds through more than 30 closely spaced hairpins, many of which will require full steering lock in standardized vehicles. The roadway is paved but narrow, with limited space between the edge of the pavement and the steep drop-offs, depending on the direction of travel. French road authorities do publish updates indicating snow or ice on the surface of the road, especially between November and March, and when the Monte Carlo Rally includes this stage, it often becomes one of the most unpredictable segments because competitors may face dry pavement, wet patches, ice, and snow within a single descent or ascent. Rally archives include numerous examples of teams adjusting their tire choices specifically for this pass. Snow clearing operations in the winter are common. During severe storms, temporary closures do happen, and those actions are publicly communicated through their departmental networks. One unusual element is how it combines dense vegetation with the mountain geography. Large sections of the road are enclosed by forest, which limits visibility and creates a notable contrast with the wide-open alpine passes found elsewhere in Europe. Tour buses and larger vehicles do use the road, but they often need multi-point maneuvers to negotiate certain turns. The cliffs and forested slopes do create conditions in which engine noise is reflected back towards the road, so rally coverage often notes this as a sensory feature of the stage. But it's not a manufactured claim. The results from the physical geography of the pass allow it to happen. The Col de Turini's strangeness comes not from danger, but how from its alignment, its history, and use as a motorsports stage intersect with a narrow, twisting mountain road that's maintained its original character for decades. Number 9. The Guoliang Tunnel Road in China. Located in the Henan province, the Guoliang Tunnel Road is one of the most unusual engineered roads in China because it was carved directly into the side of a cliff by local villagers. The road connects the small village of Guoliang, situated within the Taihang Mountains, to the outside world. Before its construction, the only access to the village was a steep, narrow path, which required significant physical effort, and it was unsafe for transporting goods. Construction of this new tunnel began in the early 1970s. The villagers, without access to any modern tunneling equipment, used hand tools, hammers and chisels, all to remove the rock. Precise daily working conditions can't always be verified in detail, though the general timeline and construction method are well documented. Safety conditions, of course, were limited and progress was slow because the work was done at great height on exposed rock faces. The finished road is about 1.2 kilometers long with a series of these little windows carved into the cliff. These openings serve multiple purposes. They provide light, they allow debris to be removed during construction, and they serve as viewing points over the valley below. The road itself is about 4, maybe 5 meters wide, and this can accommodate standard vehicles, and it leaves a little margin for error. Passing another vehicle requires a lot of caution. There's no shoulders or modern guardrails, and the roadway is paved today, but the alignment and tunnel walls remain largely as they were as the villagers completed the work. Few roads elsewhere in the world were created under these kinds of conditions by residents of an isolated village using only basic tools to carve a functional vehicle route through a cliff. The combination of its narrow profile, its vertical exposure, and series of cliffside openings makes it an unusually distinctive and entirely awesome piece of road engineering. Number 8. The Alaskan Haines Highway. The Haines Highway, running from Haines, Alaska into British Columbia and the Yukon, is widely known for its recurring frost zones, sections where intense freeze-thaw cycles deform the pavement. While these frost heaves are common in northern regions, the scale along this particular highway makes it stand out as one of the strangest environments in North America. Permafrost is the ground that remains frozen for at least 2 consecutive years. When the surface layer thaws and refreezes, the movement of this can lift or distort the road above. The movements aren't uniform either. They vary by soil type, drainage conditions, and local climate, which creates a patchwork of bumps and depressions in the highway. Drivers will encounter these deformities, most notably during late winter and early spring when the thawing begins. State maintenance crews mark the worst zones with the warning signs and often reduce the speed limits here. Repairing these is challenging because the forces causing them are tied deep into the conditions of the surface. Standard resurfacing may only last a season before the ground will shift again. The official project reports confirm that portions of the highway do require frequent rehabilitation. It can change noticeably from year to year and in some cases from one season to the next. Even engineered solutions like improved drainage, insulation layers, or even soil replacement have produced mixed results in this region. Heavy snowfall, strong winds, and a brief whiteout condition are all documented hazards here. Avalanche paths do intersect the corridor too, which leads to periodic closures. All of these issues are included in official travel advisories, and none are exaggerated by what is publicly reported. But despite the difficult conditions, the Haines Highway is a vital connection for freight, tourism, and local communities. It links coastal Alaska with the interior road networks of Canada and provides access to significant areas in British Columbia and the Yukon. Drivers may travel the same stretch in different years and encounter an entirely different surface. This makes the highway an ongoing engineering challenge. The strangeness of this one is not in the dramatic cliffs or views or steep grades, but in the way the ground underneath it is constantly reshaping the road. Moving on to number 7, the Zojila Pass Road in India. The Zojila Pass. It's one of the most important mountain roads in the Himalayas. It connects the Kashmir Valley to the Ladakh region and sits at an elevation of over 3,500 meters. That's nearly 12,000 feet. What makes it qualify as a strange road is its combination of critical importance and extremely difficult terrain. The road clings to steep mountain slopes, sometimes carved directly into loose rock, with very limited space for vehicles to maneuver. The road follows a route historically used by traders and herders long before any modern construction, so today it's maintained by Indian Border Roads Organization, and its operation is essential for their year-round access to goods and fuel. Every winter, heavy snowfalls will block the pass, and avalanches can close the road for weeks at a time. Clearing it requires specialized equipment, and the BRO teams work through some of the harshest weather imaginable. There's a natural instability in the rock here, especially under freeze-thaw cycles. As the temperature fluctuates, the rocks will loosen and fall onto the roadway, and it makes road maintenance extremely difficult. Visibility, too, is often limited due to fog, drifting snow, or even dust from the dry sections. In monsoon months, rainfall triggers small landslides and mud flows. And despite the conditions, though, the local truck drivers here regularly navigate the route in standard vehicles. Of course, their experience with the road does contribute to its safe use, although the documented closures and delays do happen frequently and are publicly reported by regional authorities. To improve its long-term reliability, the government began construction of a tunnel, which, when complete, will provide year-round, weather-independent access. This tunnel's a project designed to bypass the most unstable segments of the road. Until it becomes operational, though, the existing one is the primary overland connection. It's really not a scenic tourist route, but a functioning supply artery. Its appearance may seem improvised or temporary, yet it's maintained continuously through engineering practices that are suited to these high-altitude environments. It just goes to show how vital a modern road can exist in conditions where terrain is working constantly against you. Number 6. Eshima Ohashi Bridge in Japan. The Eshima Ohashi Bridge is one of the most photographed bridges in Japan because from certain angles it appears almost vertical. Many viral images create the impression that drivers have to climb this impossibly steep incline, almost looking like a roller coaster and then a road. In reality, the bridge's grade is steep, but it's entirely manageable, and its unusual visual appearance comes from the perspective created when the bridge is photographed from a distance with telephoto lenses. It was completed in 2004, and to achieve the necessary height of approximately 45 meters, engineers had to design an approach gradient of about 5.1 on one side and 6.1 on the other. So those values fall within normal limits for road bridges, and they don't present any unusual challenge to your vehicle. The strangeness comes from the compression of distance in photographs. When you photograph it with a long focal length lens, the approach ramp looks much steeper than they truly are because the camera flattens the depth and exaggerates the vertical rise. But structurally, the bridge spans about 1.5 kilometers with a central section that's designed for shipping clearance. And it functions as an ordinary roadway. Passenger cars, trucks, and buses use it daily, and its traffic data shows no unusual rates of incidents or any mechanical failures attributed to the slope. The bridge did replace an older drawbridge that did cause significant delays due to frequent openings for boat traffic, and eliminating those delays was the primary reason for constructing this bridge. Because the region is pretty level, the sudden rise of this bridge does create a visual contrast that accentuates that height, and this does contribute to the perception that the structure is unusually steep or even difficult to traverse. This bridge is considered strange not just because of its actual performance, but because its visual distortion in photographs has made it internationally known as one of the world's steepest bridges, even though its measured grades are entirely ordinary. Number 5. The Leh-Manali Highway in India. The Leh-Manali Highway is a high-altitude road in northern India, connecting Leh in Ladakh with Manali in the Himachal Pradesh. It spans about 490 kilometers across several major passes, including the Tanglang La and Baralacha La, both of which exceed 4,800 meters in elevation. Now, unlike typical highways, this route's only open for a few months a year. Heavy snowfall closes it from roughly November to late May or early June. The road combines some long stretches of paved surface with unpaved, partially paved sections depending on the year and maintenance cycle, and documentation shows that it's continuously improving the route, but the high altitude and harsh conditions does cause rapid degradation. Of course, it comes down to the thawing and refreezing of the surface, along with consistent runoff from melting snow, which creates potholes and waterlogged segments. A well-documented challenge involves river crossings here. Prior to the construction of these certain bridges, vehicles had to cross shallow streams directly, which would swell during the day as the snow melted. While more bridges have been added over time, some segments still require caution in the presence of meltwater. But the highway is crucial for transporting supplies to Ladakh, especially for the Indian Army, which relies heavily on this route for seasonal logistics. Because the border regions here are sensitive, and their international boundaries, they keep the road functional is a strategically important thing. But what makes this highway strange is the reality of maintaining a long-distance road at extreme elevations. In an environment that's prone to snow, ice, landslides, and temperature swings, it's one of India's most demanding and unusual transport corridors. Number 4. The Eyre Highway in Australia. The Eyre Highway is a major east-west route that connects Western Australia and South Australia. The segment known as the 90-mile straight, it's located between Baladonia and Kaiguna, is one of the longest perfectly straight stretches of road anywhere in the world. It goes for over 90 miles with no curves, and it's confirmed by Australian transport authorities and official highway maps. The Nullarbor region through which the road passes is a limestone plain. Now, the word Nullarbor itself comes from the Latin nullus arbor, meaning no trees, and this landscape reflects that name accurately. The terrain is flat, sparsely vegetated, and geologically stable, which made it suitable for constructing a long, straight road. There's no bends, hills, major intersections, or any structural features along the entire length of it, and drivers encounter continuous flat horizons in both directions. Western Australia's Road Safety Commission notes that monotony on long, straight highways increase the risks of drowsiness, and official signage encourages you to stop at a designated rest area. Road trains, these are multi-trailer freight vehicles, regularly use this road. These trucks are among the largest legal highway vehicles anywhere in the world. Their presence is well documented in freight transport reports, and passing them on the straight requires care due to their air turbulence and length. But fuel stations, rest stops, and small roadhouses do exist, but they're spaced way far apart. There are often more than 100 kilometers between services. Drivers have to plan fuel and supplies carefully, particularly during extreme heat in the summer, and emergency response in this region can take longer than in populated areas. This is a key link between Western and Eastern Australia. It carries local traffic, long-haul freight, and it caters to some tourism. The Nullarbor Strait is one of the world's most recognizable examples of a completely uninterrupted linear roadway. There's no hidden dangers here, or dramatic cliffs, just a long stretch of unbroken road across an enormous open plain. Number 3. The Pan American Highway Darien Gap discontinuity. So the Pan American Highway, this is often described as the longest continuous road network on Earth, stretching from Alaska's Arctic region to the southern tip of South America. However, this common description is technically incorrect. The network is not continuous. There's one major and fully documented interruption, the Darien Gap. This is a 100 to 160 kilometer break between Yavisa and Panama in the town of Turbo in Colombia. No highway, paved or unpaved, connects the two nations through this region. The absence isn't due to an oversight or a lack of interest. Governments, engineers, environmental scientists, and organizations have studied this possibility for nearly a century. The conclusion has consistently been the same. For reasons tied to ecology, public health, culture, and logistics, the Darien Gap remains one of the few large land barriers in the modern global road system. Government studies from Panama and Colombia do note that building a multi-lane highway here would require clearing huge sections of forest and constructing extensive bridge systems across wetlands and rivers. And the findings aren't speculative, they're based on formal impact evaluations conducted since the 1950s. Some declassified U.S. Army Corps of Engineer reports from the mid-20th century do outline reconnaissance missions through this corridor. They identified unstable soils, frequent flooding, and slopes prone to landslides. Even today, with some modern machinery, the cost and disruption would be immense. For reference, contemporary feasibility studies estimate that only a small fraction of the route would be buildable without a major structural intervention. Security conditions, too, have also been a documented barrier. For decades, Colombian armed groups operated within or near parts of the Darien Gap, creating risks for survey teams. Although the situation has changed over time, these considerations are part of every official assessment regarding possible construction of a road. Because there's no road, overland travelers who wish to continue from Panama to Colombia typically ship their vehicles through a cargo ship or container service. And those procedures are covered extensively in overlanding guidebooks. A smaller number of travelers will transport motorcycles and bicycles via air freight, so there's no bridge or ferry protecting coastal bypasses, and this is officially designated as part of the highway network. Some myths have circulated about hidden roads or maybe some secret construction attempts in the gap. None of those claims are supported by any official records. The fact remains that there is no official, functional, or partially built road connecting Panama and Colombia through this region. This represents one place on the connected landmasses of the Americas where just modern transportation infrastructure simply stops. It's not a technical impossibility, it is an intentional absence that's been shaped by the environmental protection here, the public health concerns, cultural rights, political considerations, and the immense logistical challenges. In an age where nearly every continent is crisscrossed by highways, the Darien Gap stands out as a rare example of a region where nature, policy, and culture have collectively prevented the completion of what could have been one of the most ambitious road links in modern history. Number 2. The floating seasonal road in Russia. Lake Baikal in Siberia. It's the world's deepest freshwater lake. It holds roughly 20% of the planet's unfrozen fresh water. In winter, this lake undergoes a transformation that has been documented for decades. Its surface freezes thick enough to support officially sanctioned ice roads. These aren't informal tracks created by local drivers either. These are regulated winter routes authorized and monitored by the Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations and the Irkutsk regional government. The most consistently maintained of these is the seasonal ice road between the mainland and Olkhon Island, the lake's largest island. Now, Emercom requires a minimum thickness of about 30 to 35 centimeters for standard passenger vehicles, with heavier vehicles requiring greater thickness. Some years, if conditions remain unstable or temperatures do fluctuate, the road doesn't even open at all. Baikal's water is exceptionally clear and it's low in suspended sediment, so when it freezes, the resulting ice looks transparent. Photographs taken by scientists and personnel show that the drivers can often see through the ice into the deep blue water beneath. Authorities explicitly warn the motorists not to rely on visual cues for any safety assessment. Only official measurements determine whether the road is open or closed. The road itself, though, is marked with poles, reflective signs, and sometimes evergreen branches placed at intervals of about 50 to 100 meters. These markers do indicate the safe corridor, so avoiding hazards like pressure ridges, cracks, and zones influenced by springs, and areas where currents have prevented stable freezing. And unlike small ponds or shallow lakes, Baikal does experience something called ice breathing. This is a phenomenon in which the thick sheet expands and contracts and produces long fractures that can reach several meters deep. These cracks are natural, and while necessary, maintenance crews do repair sections of the road and they bypass shifting fractures. Speeds on the road are usually pretty strict and scientifically justified. Regulations typically impose limits around 10 to 20 kilometers an hour. Driving too fast can create wave-like oscillations under the ice sheet. These waves will stress the ice and sometimes lead to cracking, so drivers have to maintain large distances between vehicles to avoid this concentrated loading on a single ice segment. The road has practical importance here. Residents on the island use it to access groceries, medical services, and transportation hubs on the mainland. Bringing supplies across the ice is often faster and cheaper than relying on ferries or air transport. However, authorities do strictly limit vehicle weight, usually about 5 tons, to prevent overstressing the ice sheet. For many Siberian communities, winter travel over these frozen surfaces has been part of life for generations. However, the scale of this road is remarkable. Drivers travel over a body of water that reaches depths of more than 1,600 meters beneath them, and that fact alone makes the experience different from crossing smaller lakes. This is a highway that literally floats on top of one of Earth's most extraordinary lakes. And yeah, you wouldn't catch me driving on this one. Number 1. The Trans-Labrador Highway of Canada. The TLH, the Trans-Labrador Highway, is one of the most isolated and geographically demanding long-distance road systems. It stretches across the interior of Labrador and connecting to the Quebec road network. It spans more than 1,100 kilometers depending on how one counts its various segments. But what makes it strange compared to most others isn't any single feature, but a combination of things: extreme remoteness, uninhabited distances, challenging subarctic climate and geological instability, and of course a near total absence of roadside services across hundreds of kilometers at a time. The road itself began as a series of isolated industrial roads that were built to support hydroelectric development in the region. The records of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador show that the roadway evolved piece by piece over several decades, with major expansions happening from the late 90s into the 2010s. The final major link connecting Happy Valley and Goose Bay with the Labrador-Quebec border was completed and opened to traffic in 2009. Transport Canada's safety notices here specifically instruct drivers to carry spare tires, emergency supplies, and enough fuel for the longest segments, because assistance may take hours to arrive if a vehicle breaks down. For many segments, large parts of it were gravel, not pavement. As of the early 2020s, most, but not all, sections have been paved. The roadbed still experiences heavy degradation due to frost heaves and shifting subsoil. Even the paved stretches, though, can become rough within a single season. Snowfall's heavy here and persistent from late autumn through early spring, and the Transportation Department regularly issues winter travel warnings stating that whiteout conditions and drifting snow may make travel unsafe. Wildlife encounters on the road are common. The region supports huge populations of black bear, caribou, and moose, all of which could wander across the road. This highway travels through a boreal forest, tundra, and glacier terrain, and the landscape is sparsely inhabited, so much of Labrador's interior has a population density close to zero. There's no towns along much of the route, only occasional maintenance depots. But why it's on this list of strange roads comes in part from the mindset required to drive it. This is not a scenic detour or a lightly traveled mountain road, it's a functioning wilderness corridor. Fuel planning is essential, weather conditions can change rapidly, and the North Atlantic systems and Arctic air masses make travel challenging. Satellite communication or offline navigation tools are recommended by provincial agencies because cell coverage is intermittent or just absent. Even newly paved portions do require significant maintenance after one season. Everything about its construction, the maintenance challenges, the operational constraints, and environmental exposure is all documented by government agencies, so it makes it one of the world's strangest and most isolated roads that are grounded entirely in verified fact.